There is much more to this than we initially realized, as Alex Nylander has given us some shocking details surrounding his contract negotiations with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and also gave some insight into what his role will be as the season inches closer and closer. We'll break that down in this episode, as well as discuss William Nylander. He broke down some very interesting comments about his brother. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we do, if you're part of the 70 or so percent or aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're trying to surpass Habs Digest, who just hit 14,000 subscribers. So guys, we can't have them beating us. Make sure to hit that button. But Darius, we have a lot to discuss today. The coaching staff spoke out on William Nylander's brother Alex. Willie spoke out on Alex, and Alex himself gave some very interesting details as to what the contract negotiations look like among other NHL teams. So a ton to break down here. Let's start with that. So we know that currently, the way the Leafs team is constructed, everybody's fighting for a roster spot and to make the Toronto Maple Leafs out of camp. Now, Alex Nylander doesn't have an NHL, he doesn't have a two-way contract right now, so he can't directly have a path there. But he said that he did receive NHL offers from other teams, but after talking to his family and his agent, he liked the idea and ultimately signed with the AHL team of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Toronto Marlies. So before we get into the bunch of the other things and what his role is going to be, I just want to get your thoughts on this, Darius. I think that this makes it pretty clear that there is definitely a path for him to start with the Toronto Maple Leafs, or at least come up to the Toronto Maple Leafs at some point in the fairly near future, because he gave up NHL offers where the money was and more money was to sign with where his brother plays in Toronto.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily surprised by this because I think, it is pretty good for his career. He was a really high draft pick and things haven't worked out for him, whether it be injuries or the teams he was playing on. They couldn't find a good spot for him to play. And now he's landed in Toronto. So I'm not really surprised because his brother plays here. And like they mentioned yesterday too, they're going to be living together. So that's a really good, spot for Alex Nylander to be living with a professional who's been doing it for 8-9 years at this point with William Nylander. And William Nylander knows what it takes to be an elite player in this league, and especially in Toronto. So no better person to learn from than your own brother who has that experience. And so that's all great. I'm not, entirely surprised by that. But in terms of, actually making the team, I think there is a world where he can make the team. If he shows that he is very committed, he's working on his defensive game. He's very detailed, as Craig Berube has been saying that, players have to be detailed and take care of the puck and take care of themselves. If he shows that, there is a world where they make room for him and they do sign him to a two-way deal, right? But at this point in time, just to make room for everyone else like Pacioretty, and obviously they have a vision for their team that does not include Alex Nylander at this time, but he can play his way into the lineup, through training camp and obviously preseason. So there's a world where we do see him on the team. And I do think we'll see him in the NHL this year. But the way it stands right now, he has an AHL contract. We probably won't see him. But the goal is to eventually make the Leafs make an impact. And I think that's great for Alex Nylander's, obviously his career, but great for the Maple Leafs too, because he sounds driven.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like you mentioned, there's a direct path for him to make it out of camp, especially when you're competing with guys like Easton Cowan, like Nikita Grabenkin, and even just some of the other guys you mentioned, Pacioretty as well. So there's some interesting things, and even Steven Lorentz is another guy that he's competing with. So there's tons of different guys that he's competing with, and he doesn't have a direct path, unlike some of the other Marlies guys, to the NHL level. But we can see that he was getting in some work following the Group 1 skate at Leafs training camp. So he's putting in the work. You mentioned he's going to be living with his brother, so there's a lot going for him, but he's also a very solid player, and I think that's obviously the most important thing here is he can score goals. He's definitely a goal scorer, and that's something the Leafs need. We were talking about how they might need that even more in the absence of Nick Robertson, but now that Nick Robertson is back, adding more goal scoring, of course, would never hurt. But William Nylander said he's ready for the season, and he's excited at the prospect of playing with his brother Alex. Hopefully that works out the way we want it. Now, what that essentially means, at least in my opinion, is obviously Alex got to work for it, have a good AHL season, or at least first handful, 20 or whatever, how many games it takes. Maybe, injuries happen in the NHL. Things happen. Some people are going to get sent down. Some people are going to get called up. I think Alex Nylander is right at the brink of being ready to get called up, assuming he has a decent year in the NHL. But he's going to need to continue to prove it at the AHL level right now for this season. He can't go out and just coast because there's going to be a lot of guys fighting for that spot that the Leafs have. And quite frankly, they don't have many, especially in lieu of the addition of Max Pacioretty, which is going to be very, very soon here once the trade happens.
Yeah, I think the most likely outcome for Alex Nylander, at least to start the year, will be that he will be with the Toronto Marlies, because I feel like they have a vision for their team right now that doesn't include him. And I'm not saying that he's a bad player, and I don't think that they think he's a bad player. I think they want him to go down and kind of prove his worth, because he had a great, little stint there with Columbus last year, but it was a very small sample size after coming up from the AHL and getting traded over from Pittsburgh's organization as well. So he has shown that he can score at the NHL level, but if that's all he can do, I don't know if the Leafs are necessarily interested in just that, or if he finds a spot on this team just being able to score, right? Depth scoring is good, but what else can you bring to the table, especially on a Craig Berube team with all these different intangibles that he's been talking about the last couple of days? So I think they want him to go down to the Marlies, see what he has there. Obviously, they know he can score, but what else is in his game? They'll figure that out while he's in the Marlies. Again, this is most likely outcome. There is a world where he plays himself onto the team right out of camp. We're just going to have to wait and see how that shakes out. But I am rooting for this player. I think we definitely will see him on the Leafs at some point this year, whether it be emergency call up, whatever it is. If they end up signing him to a two-way deal halfway through the year, if someone's playing well, they will make space for you. That's exactly what Treliving and Berube have been saying. And I believe that that is the case. They want the best possible players on the team who want to win and want to help the Leafs win. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with them. But I think best case scenario, or most likely scenario, he starts the year in the Marlies, but we will see him at some point.
Yeah, which is pretty exciting, as this is going to be one of the more exciting training camps we've had in a very long time. If you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, with all the prospects and players battling for a spot. Obviously, Craig Berube and Nylander catch up after practice. There's a lot of different communication that's ongoing between the coach, between William Nylander, between Alex Nylander as well. And Brad Living spoke out and said, "There's a path at the Leafs roster for the teenage hopefuls. We will make room for young players if young players can help us win." Now, obviously, when he said this, the highlight of these players was specifically Easton Cowan and at that time Fraser Minton before he went down with the injury. So again, Alex Nylander can be jumped and grouped into that mix. He's obviously not as flashy and as exciting in theory as a guy like Easton Cowan is one of the top prospects, or the top prospect in the Leaf system, one of the top prospects in hockey. But one of the more important things for this is that there is a path for these young guys to play. And ultimately, Shanahan, Brad Treliving, everybody, they just want to win hockey games, and they'll do whatever it takes to do that. And if that means calling up Alex Nylander because he's having a phenomenal AHL season, then so be it. That's what's going to happen. I'm happy that Brad Treliving kind of tells it how it is, the opposite of the Kyle Dubas effect, where he would kind of give vague answers. Brad Treliving saying, hey, if they're going to help us win, which is what they need to do, because like Morgan Marley said, it's cup or bust this year for the Leafs to a degree. They'll call up the guys and give whoever it takes to win.
Yeah, he's being real transparent. And I like that, right? Like you said, with the last administration, it felt like sometimes they were playing the game of we know more than you do, and you can't really see what we're seeing. And now I feel like with Brad Treliving, he's like, listen, you guys are seeing the same things we are, and we're going to try and upgrade in these areas. And if anyone outplays somebody else, they'll make the team. We want the best chance to win. So I think that's exactly what they're doing in terms of William Nylander at center as well. They're being very transparent about it. They want to give him a good shot at playing Nylander at center and see how that shakes out. And if it doesn't work after a pretty substantial, sample size, then they're going to move on from it. But at this point in time, I think they're willing to give a lot of things a try, and they're being pretty transparent about it.
Yeah, I think ultimately at this point, it's going to be a matter of whether or not they're able to compete at the NHL level, specifically all these young guys, because we saw it last year. Fraser Minton had a great camp. He had a great preseason. He went out there and got a little bit, he looked a bit out of place. And that's going to be the biggest question, not only for Alex Nylander, but for Lawrence and all these guys, specifically Easton Cowan, as he's going to definitely get those 9 games. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Let us know in the comments your thoughts are on this. Do you want to see Alex Nylander start to play with the Toronto Maple Leafs sooner than later? Let us know. And let us know what your thoughts are on Alex Nylander and William Nylander's comments. Thank you guys for watching.